Arrested him for giving false information about a missing person.
That was the first day that I started to suspect foul play from their own son.
I think it's time we start talking about what happened to your parents. Like the truthful version.
Okay.
Okay? So we have like 20 pages of writing. We're gonna start with a clean white piece of paper for you to start telling the truth.
Okay.
Why? Because listen to me. This is the only chance you're gonna have to tell us the truth.
Okay.
Okay?
What?
A neighbor's security camera caught something small that night. A flicker of light in a window of the Halderson house. On, then gone, then on again. At the time, it meant nothing to anyone. Porch lights flicker. People stay up late. Investigators would later show that same clip to a jury and argue it was firelight. Not a lamp, not a television. A fire, burning low, in a fireplace. In a house where two people had just been killed by their own son. But that's the end of the story. To understand how a family ends up here, you have to go back to the beginning, not of the murder, but of the lie that caused it. Because before Chandler Halderson was a killer, he was something almost every parent recognizes. A son who couldn't admit he was falling behind, and who kept building a fake life to cover it, one lie at a time, until the only way to protect the fiction was to make sure the two people who could expose it never spoke again. Bart and Krista Halderson lived in Windsor, a quiet village of a few thousand people about 20 minutes north of Madison. Bart was 50, Krista was 53. They'd built an ordinary, comfortable life, the kind of life that doesn't make the news. 2 sons, a house they were proud of. Krista worked alongside people who considered her a close friend, not just a colleague. Their older son, Mitchell, was 24, working in tech, engaged to be married, the son whose life was proceeding exactly the way it looked on paper. Their younger son, Chandler, was 23, still living at home, and on paper, his life looked good too. He told his parents he was enrolled at Madison College, working toward a degree in IT. He told them he had an internship, and he told them something that made Bart, in particular, proud enough to mention it to people outside the family. That his son had landed a job with SpaceX, Elon Musk's company. None of it was true. Chandler hadn't just told a lie about college, he had flunked out, and instead of telling his parents, he built an entire cast of characters to keep them from finding out. Court records lay out the scale of it. When his parents wanted proof of enrollment, there was an academic advisor to email, except the advisor didn't exist. When they wanted proof of the insurance company internship, there was a human resources manager who corresponded with them, except that manager didn't exist either. Investigators would later identify at least 4 fictitious people Chandler invented and communicated through, using fake names, to keep 2 separate fabricated careers alive in his parents' eyes. He also told people, including at various points his girlfriend, that he was part of a police scuba dive team. That wasn't true either. This is the detail that makes the case land differently than most. There was no single, dramatic lie. There was a structure, a maintained, actively managed fiction requiring constant upkeep, fake emails, fake job offers, fake advisors, sustained for months, because the alternative was telling his parents the truth, that he wasn't in school, wasn't employed, and wasn't who he'd told them he was. By the summer of 2021, the lie was under real pressure. Prosecutors say Bart had arranged to meet Chandler at the college, in person, on campus, to sit down with the academic advisor his son kept referencing. There was no advisor, there was no meeting to have, and there was no more room to invent one. This is where the prosecution's theory begins, and it's worth saying plainly. Chandler Halderson never stood up in court, or anywhere else on record, and said, "I killed them because they were about to find out." He has never given an on-record reason for what happened next. What prosecutors argued and what a jury ultimately found persuasive enough to convict, is that the collision between a scheduled, unavoidable meeting and a lie that could not survive scrutiny is what turned deception into homicide. July 1st, 2021, is the last day anyone has confirmed seeing Bart and Krista Halderson alive. Investigators would later conclude the killings happened in the basement of their own home sometime in the days that followed, likely within that same window, before the holiday weekend most families were spending at cookouts and fireworks. Bart was shot at least twice, in the back, with a rifle. The medical examiner's office would formally rule his death a homicide caused by homicidal violence, including firearm injury. Krista's cause of death, notably, was never conclusively established, a detail that becomes important later, because it means the physical evidence never gave investigators a clean, single answer for exactly what happened to her. Only that she was gone, and that whatever happened, happened in that house. On July 2nd, Krista didn't show up.
Usual was it for, number one, for Krista not to show up for work, not to call,
Yeah.
and just not show up? How unusual.
Extremely unusual.
Dan.
Cars were there. I was like, why are both cars here? And I was starting to go around the back of the house, and then Chandler came out the side door, and he came out in a towel saying, oh, I just got out of the shower. You know, hey, what's going on? I was like, oh, we're just looking for Bart and Krista. And he said, oh yeah, they had to go up north this morning for an emergency up at the...
All out concern.
Right.
You know something's happened to her
Right,
now.
right.
For work. Her co-worker and close friend, Daniel Kroninger, tried reaching her. Nothing. He drove to the house and found Chandler, who told him his parents had left for the family cabin for the 4th of July weekend. As the days passed with no word from Bart or Krista, Kroninger pushed Chandler to go to police. Chandler didn't rush to do it. When he finally did, July 7th, nearly a week after his parents were last seen, he told Dane County Sheriff's detectives that his mom and dad had been picked up and driven to their cabin by a couple he didn't know. He also spoke to local news. On camera, he told a reporter his parents had gone to White Lake for the holiday. Cabin, festivities, better drink prices at the bars, he said. Casual, specific, unremarkable detail. The kind of thing you say when you're not worried. And in the meantime, he went door to door in his own neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen his parents. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked exactly like what it was supposed to look like. A worried son. Detectives Sabrina Sims and Brian Shunk caught the case, and almost immediately, the story had a hole in it. On July 8th, Bart and Krista's older son, Mitchell, drove 3 hours north to the family cabin to check it himself. Langlade County deputies met him there. What they found was nothing. No sign anyone had been to that cabin recently at all. Not for a holiday weekend. Not with an unknown couple. Not with Bart and Krista. At the same time, detectives were interviewing friends and neighbors, trying to pin down where Chandler actually was over the holiday. The picture that came back didn't match what he'd told police, or what he'd told the reporter, or what he'd told the neighbors he canvassed. By July 8th, the sheriff's office had upgraded the case. It wasn't a missing persons case anymore. It was suspicious. The break came from a property in Cottage Grove, land connected to the family of Chandler's girlfriend, and a place investigators learned Chandler had visited recently, without an obvious reason to be there. When detectives searched it, they found a mutilated human torso. It had gunshot wounds. Nearby, hidden inside an oil drum, they found cutting instruments. That same night, after another round of questioning, Chandler was arrested, not yet for murder, for giving false information to police about a missing person. It was a holding charge. Investigators didn't have a confirmed identification on the remains yet, and they didn't have a full case. What they had was enough to stop him from walking out the door. With Chandler in custody, investigators got a search warrant for the Halderson home. They didn't find a murder weapon inside, but in the basement, they found a spent shell casing, and in several areas of the house, blood tested positive, the kind of forensic detail that turns a missing persons case into a homicide investigation overnight. 2 days later, on July 10th, searchers went back to the Cottage Grove property and expanded the search. They found more remains, this time confirmed on July 12th to be Bart Halderson. Krista was still missing, and for a brief, tense stretch, investigators genuinely didn't know what that meant. Was she a victim too? Was she involved? Detectives hadn't ruled anything out yet, not officially. At a press conference, Sheriff Calvin Barrett told reporters the department was hoping for the best. He said investigators were optimistic Krista was still alive, and that they'd let the evidence tell them otherwise if that changed. It would change, but not yet. First, the case had to catch up with what Chandler had been doing for the past 8 days. Because while detectives worked the physical evidence, Chandler had been leaving a very different kind of trail behind. Investigators pulled Chandler's internet history. On the morning of his arrest, in the hours before detectives took him into custody, he had run 6 Google searches back to back, all variations on the same theme. Body found Wisconsin. Woman's body found in Wisconsin. Wisconsin dismembered body found. He wasn't searching out of concern for his missing parents. He was checking whether the remains had been identified yet, whether the story he'd built was still holding, or whether it was already coming apart in the news before he even knew it. Later, forensic investigators would connect those searches to something even more specific: the family's own fireplace. A forensic expert testified that more than 200 human bone fragments were recovered from it, which is the flicker of firelight from the opening of this story. That's what the neighbor's camera had actually caught. Not a late night, an attempt to destroy what couldn't be explained. The case's biggest break didn't come from a warrant. It came from a relationship Chandler had been quietly, repeatedly unfaithful in. His girlfriend, Catherine Melander, friends called her Cat, had a history of Chandler cheating on her, so she'd taken to using Snapchat's location sharing feature, Snap Map, to keep track of where he actually was. When detectives asked, she handed over her phone data without hesitation. Buried in it was a screenshot, placing Chandler at a remote spot along the Wisconsin River in the early hours of July 3rd, a location detectives learned was one of Chandler's favorite places to swim, going back years. A photo existed of him there from roughly a year before any of this happened. Investigators didn't have to guess what that meant. They went to the location the Snap Map data pointed to, and combined with a tip from a sharp-eyed neighbor who'd noticed someone matching Chandler's description in the area around that same time, they found more remains. To be clear about what Melander's cooperation meant for her, investigators determined early on that she had nothing to do with the killings, and cleared her. Her Snapchat habit, born out of suspicion about infidelity, not murder, is what ultimately helped identify where Krista was. On July 14th, nearly 2 weeks after she was last seen alive, Krista Halderson's remains were located on Department of Natural Resources land near the town of Roxbury, close to the river location the Snap Map data had flagged. The optimism from that press conference days earlier was gone. What remained was confirmation. Both of Chandler's parents were dead, and by that point, virtually every piece of the story he'd told, the trip, the unknown couple, the cabin, had already been proven false. As digital forensics teams went through phone records, they found something Chandler had been doing since the very beginning, sending text messages from his mother's phone to his own, timed to make it look like Krista was still alive and checking in, long after she was dead. It's a detail that strips away any reading of this as panic or a cover-up that spiraled out of someone's control after the fact. Sending yourself fake reassurance texts from a dead woman's phone isn't an impulsive decision. It's maintenance. The same instinct that built 4 fictitious people to protect a lie about college was now being used to fake his mother's continued existence. On July 15th, Chandler was formally charged. 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, 2 counts of mutilating a corpse, 2 counts of giving false information about a missing person, 8 charges in total, once the full scope was in. After his arrest, according to investigators, Chandler told them 2 things worth remembering: that they didn't know the whole story, and that he didn't feel bad about what he'd done. He never elaborated on either one. Not to detectives, not at trial, not since. Those 7 words are as close as the public record gets to a motive in his own voice. Everything else is inference, built by prosecutors out of the wreckage of his lies. Chandler pleaded not guilty in September of 2021. His trial began in January 2022 and ran 8 days, even with a week-long pause after Chandler tested positive for COVID-19 in jail. The prosecution's case was built almost entirely on physical and digital evidence because there was no confession and no eyewitness to the killings themselves. Assistant District Attorney Andrea Raymond walked the jury through the timeline day by day, from July 1st, when Bart and Krista were believed to have been killed, to July 8th, when Chandler was arrested. She compared the case to a puzzle. Chandler, she argued, had 8 days to scatter the pieces across southern Wisconsin, and very nearly succeeded. Forensic testimony covered the bone fragments in the fireplace, over 200 of them. DNA evidence tied the cutting tools found in the oil drum back to the case. Digital evidence covered the fake texts, the search history, the fabricated emails and fictitious identities Chandler had built over months. The defense's argument was narrower, and in its own way, honest about its limits, that no one truly knew exactly what happened inside that house, that the prosecution's account of the killings themselves was built on inference, not direct proof, and that reasonable doubt about the specifics should matter to the verdict. The jury deliberated a little over 2 hours. 2 hours for 8 days of testimony, covering 2 homicides, 2 dismemberments, and a months-long campaign of fabricated identities. It wasn't a hard call for them. Guilty. All 8 counts. Chandler Halderson showed no visible reaction when the verdict was read. Outside the courtroom, District Attorney Ismail Ozan told reporters the verdict couldn't bring Bart and Krista back, but that it was a first step toward some kind of finality for the people who loved them. In her closing argument, Raymond had asked the jury to give the couple something their own son hadn't: dignity. Chandler Halderson was sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Wisconsin's first-degree intentional homicide statute makes a life sentence mandatory. The only real question at sentencing was whether he'd ever have a shot at supervised release. The judge made sure he wouldn't. One detail from the case file stayed with investigators. On the morning of his arrest, alongside his searches about bodies being found, Chandler had also looked up a decades-old, unrelated family dismemberment case. Nobody has ever offered a clean explanation for why. It's one more thread the record leaves open. The story didn't end with sentencing. In 2023, a judge vacated 2 of Chandler's lesser convictions related to hiding his parents' remains on procedural grounds. It didn't touch the life sentences. Those stood. Chandler's appellate attorney later filed what's called a no-merit report, a formal filing an attorney makes when they've reviewed the case and concluded there's no legitimate basis for appeal, while still giving the court a chance to weigh in. Chandler argued his trial counsel had been ineffective and that he'd been denied a fair trial. In late 2025, a panel of appeals court judges disagreed on every point and affirmed his conviction. As of this recording, Chandler Halderson remains incarcerated at Dodge Correctional Institution, serving 2 life sentences with no possibility of parole. Go back to that flicker in the window. At the time, it was nothing. A strange, small detail a neighbor's camera happened to catch on an otherwise unremarkable night. By the end of the case, it was the clearest image of what this really was. Not a sudden act of violence born out of one bad moment, but the last entry in a long ledger of lies, each one built to protect the last, until the only thing left to protect it with was fire, and then a shovel, and then 8 days of frantic improvisation across 3 counties. Bart and Krista Halderson believed their son had a degree in progress, a job at one of the most famous companies on earth, and a place on a police dive team. None of it was real. What was real is that they raised 2 sons, one who built an honest life, and one who built a fictional one so elaborate it eventually required their silence to survive. They didn't get that. What they got, in the end, was a jury willing to give them the only thing still available. The truth, finally, stated out loud, on the record, under both their names.